Emma Collins stared at the pregnancy test, the two pink lines blurring through her tears. At 26, her life in Boston had just imploded. 3 hours earlier, she'd told Tyler, her boyfriend of 2 years, about the baby. His response had been swift and brutal. "I'm not ready for this," he'd said, packing his things. "I never wanted kids with you, Emma." The apartment they'd shared now felt cavernous. Emma sank to the floor, her hand protectively covering her still flat stomach. The rent was due in 2 weeks, and her part-time job at the library wouldn't cover it. Her parents had passed away years ago in a car accident, and her only sister lived abroad. Barely keeping in touch, she forced herself to call her boss at the library. "I'm sorry, Emma," Mrs. Winters said, her voice sympathetic but firm. "We're cutting hours, not adding them." "I wish I could help." Emma hung up, desperation setting in. Her savings would last a month, maybe 2. After that, she and her unborn child would have nowhere to go. 3 days later, the building management slipped an eviction notice under her door. Tyler had apparently stopped paying his share of the rent months ago. The management company wanted the full back payments within 30 days. That evening, Emma wrapped herself in a coat and headed to Beacon Hill's Harborview Cafe, an upscale establishment where she'd once worked as a waitress. The manager, Sophia, had always been kind to her. "Just part-time dishwashing. Anything," Emma pleaded. Sophia squeezed her hand. "The owner's cutting staff, sweetheart. But stay for dinner, on me. You look like you haven't eaten all day." Emma sat at a corner table near the windows overlooking Boston Harbor. The twinkling lights of the city reflected on the water, mocking the darkness she felt inside. She absently touched her stomach, whispering, "I'll figure something out for us. I promise." She didn't notice the tall figure approaching until a deep voice broke through her thoughts. "Is this seat taken?" Emma looked up into the most intense gray eyes she'd ever seen. The man wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than her yearly salary. Dark hair with distinguished touches of silver at the temples framed. A face that regularly graced business magazines. "You're Alexander Reed," she said, recognizing the tech billionaire whose company headquarters dominated the Boston skyline. He smiled slightly. "And you're having dinner alone, which seems like a shame." "I'm not really good company tonight," Emma said, wiping away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. Alexander Reed sat down anyway, studying her with an expression she couldn't read. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the worst nights of our lives lead to unexpected beginnings." Emma had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. For reasons Emma couldn't understand, Alexander Reed returned to Harborview Cafe the following evening, and the next. Each time he joined her table, ordered for them both, and asked questions about her life with genuine interest. She found herself revealing more than she intended: her parents' death, her financial struggles, and finally, on the 4th night, her pregnancy. "Tyler left when I told him," she said, staring into her untouched tea. "The apartment's being repossessed, and I've got 3 weeks to find somewhere to go." Alexander's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened around his coffee cup. "You have no other family?" he asked. "A sister in Switzerland who hasn't returned my calls in months." He nodded, as if confirming something to himself. "I have a proposition for you, Emma. One that might solve your immediate problems." Emma tensed. She'd heard stories about wealthy men and their propositions to vulnerable women. Reading her expression, Alexander's eyes softened. "Not that kind of proposition. I'm offering you a place to stay, the guest house on my estate in Brookline. It's sitting empty, and you'd have complete privacy. Why would you help a stranger?" Emma asked, suspicious. Alexander set down his cup, his expression suddenly vulnerable. "Because 12 years ago, my sister was in your position. Pregnant, alone, desperate. I was building my company, too busy to notice how bad things had gotten." She double quotes. His voice faltered. She felt she had no options. I lost her and my niece or nephew before I even knew they existed. Emma's heart constricted. I'm so sorry. The guest house is yours if you want it, he continued. No strings attached. When the baby comes, we can discuss more permanent arrangements. The following day, Alexander's driver collected Emma and her meager belongings. The guest house turned out to be a stunning 2-bedroom cottage nestled on the grounds of Alexander's estate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked manicured gardens, and the kitchen gleamed with high-end appliances. This is too much, Emma protested. It's empty most of the year, Alexander replied. My housekeeper, Mrs. Jennings, will check on you daily. My private physician, Dr. Chun, will be available for your prenatal care. As weeks passed, Emma settled into a routine. She took long walks through the estate's gardens, helped Mrs. Jennings with light cooking, and began creating children's book illustrations, a forgotten passion from college. Alexander often invited her to dinner at the main house, a modernist mansion of glass and stone. She learned he was divorced, married briefly in his 20s to a model who'd left when his first company failed. Now, at 42, he commanded a tech empire, but returned home to an empty house. One evening, as they sat on his terrace watching the sunset, Alexander cleared his throat uncomfortably. Emma, I've been thinking about your situation, he began. I have another proposition for you, one that's considerably more complicated. I want to offer you my name, Alexander said, his voice steady despite the magnitude of his proposal. Emma nearly dropped her glass of sparkling water. Your name? Marriage, he clarified. A marriage of convenience, to be precise. Emma stared at him, certain she'd misheard. You want to marry me? But we barely know each other. Alexander leaned forward, his expression serious. Your child deserves financial security and opportunities. With my name, both of you would be protected. My resources would ensure the best education, health care, everything. People would think I trapped you, Emma said, her mind racing. I'd make it clear this was my choice, Alexander countered. Besides, this arrangement benefits me too. At 42, the board and shareholders constantly question my lack of stability. A wife and child would change that perception. Emma shook her head in disbelief. You're talking about a business transaction. Initially, yes, he admitted. We'd live separately, you in the guest house, me in the main residence. We'd attend necessary public functions together. After a year, if either of us wants out, a generous settlement would be arranged. And the baby would have my name, my protection, my resources regardless of whether our arrangement continues. Emma stood, pacing the terrace. This is insane, is it? Alexander asked quietly. More insane than facing parenthood alone with no resources? Than struggling to provide basics for your child? That night, Emma couldn't sleep. Alexander's proposal circled in her mind. It wasn't love, but it was safety, security, protection. For her child, if not for herself. In the morning, still bleary-eyed, she called her sister in Switzerland. A billionaire wants to marry you? Claire's disbelief crackled through the international connection. Emma, that sounds suspicious. He's been nothing but respectful, Emma defended. He hasn't even tried to hold my hand. Then why marry you? Emma sighed. He says it's mutually beneficial. His company image, my security. And if you develop feelings he doesn't return. Claire asked gently. The question hit Emma like a physical blow. In just weeks, Alexander had become important to her. His quiet strength, his unexpected kindness, the rare moments when he truly smiled. Was she already halfway to falling for him? 3 days later, Emma gave Alexander her answer over dinner in his modernist dining room. Yes, she said simply. For the baby's sake, I accept your proposal. Alexander nodded, his expression unreadable. He withdrew a small box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a stunning emerald ring surrounded by diamonds. It was my grandmother's, he explained. She had green eyes, like yours. As he slid the ring onto her finger, his hand lingered on hers for just a moment longer than necessary. Emma told herself the flutter in her chest was gratitude, nothing more. The next morning, headlines across Boston announced, tech billionaire Alexander Reed to wed in private ceremony. Their arrangement had officially begun. The wedding took place in Alexander's garden, with only his attorney, Mrs. Jennings, and the officiant present. Emma wore a simple white dress that accommodated her 4-month baby bump. There was no reception, no honeymoon, just paperwork and a brief, businesslike kiss that left Emma more confused than ever. The press will want photographs, Alexander explained afterward. My PR team has arranged a statement about our whirlwind romance and mutual delight about the baby. But that's not true, Emma said. Alexander's expression softened momentarily. Sometimes stories have elements of truth woven through them. I am pleased about the baby. Their first public appearance came a week later at a charity gala benefiting children's hospitals. Emma, dressed in a designer maternity gown Alexander had arranged, felt every eye in the room assessing her. Gold digger, she heard one woman whisper as they passed. Alexander's hand tightened around hers. Ignore them, he murmured. You're my wife now. They'll respect that or deal with me. Throughout the evening, Alexander remained attentive, his hand resting protectively at the small of her back. When they danced, his touch was gentle, reverent even. For moments, Emma could almost forget this was all an arrangement. The facade cracked only when they returned home. Alexander escorted her to the guest house door, his manner suddenly formal. You were perfect tonight, he said, his voice distant. Good night, Emma. She watched him walk back to the main house, his shoulders rigid. Despite sharing his name, despite carrying a child who would be raised as his, Emma had never felt more alone. As her pregnancy progressed, Emma found herself increasingly integrated into Alexander's world. His assistant coordinated her calendar with his. His tailor created a maternity wardrobe befitting Mrs. Reed. His nutritionist designed meal plans for optimal prenatal health. Yet Alexander himself remained an enigma. Some evenings, he'd join her for dinner, asking about her day, sharing stories about his company. Other times, he'd work late, sending Mrs. Jennings to check on her. Emma began to wonder if he regretted their arrangement. One night, she woke to sharp pain. Frightened, she called Alexander's private line. He answered immediately. Emma? What's wrong? Something doesn't feel right, she gasped. The baby. Alexander arrived at the guest house in seconds, still in pajama pants and a t-shirt. Without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms and carried her to his car dot at the hospital. He refused to leave her side, holding her hand through examinations, demanding the best specialists. Braxton Hicks contractions, the doctor finally explained. False labor. Common at 6 months, but you were right to come in. Relief flooded Alexander's face. His hand, still gripping Emma's, trembled slightly. I thought ... he began, then stopped himself. You should stay in the main house from now on. In case this happens again. That night, lying in the guest suite of Alexander's mansion, Emma realized something had fundamentally shifted. The fear in his eyes hadn't been about their arrangement or his image. It had been about her. About the baby. Perhaps even about them. Emma's move to the main house changed everything. Suddenly, she and Alexander shared breakfast each morning. They passed each other in hallways, brushing shoulders in doorways. They watched movies in his home theater, her feet often ending up in his lap as she dozed off. The lines of their arrangement blurred with each. Passing day. One evening, Emma found Alexander in his study, surrounded by baby furniture catalogs. I've been researching nursery designs, he explained, almost embarrassed. The room adjoining your suite has the best natural light. Emma sat beside him, touched by his thoroughness. "You don't have to do all this. I want to," he said simply. Then, hesitantly, "I'd like to be in the delivery room, if you'll allow it." Emma studied his face, the face of a man who'd begun as a stranger, become her husband on paper, and now was something undefinable. "I'd like that," she answered, as her 8th month began. Emma discovered Alexander had rearranged his entire schedule to work from home. She found him one afternoon in what was becoming the nursery, assembling a crib himself rather than having staff do it. "You're nesting," she teased. He looked up, a rare full smile transforming his face. "Perhaps I am." That night, Emma felt the baby kick particularly hard. Without thinking, she grabbed Alexander's hand and placed it on her belly. "Feel that? Your future CEO is practicing karate." Alexander's expression transformed into wonder as the baby kicked against his palm. His eyes met Emma's, and something electric passed between them. "Emma," he said, his voice rough. This arrangement, a sharp knock, interrupted as Mrs. Jennings announced dinner. The moment shattered. Alexander pulled his hand away and stood. Whatever he'd been about to say remained unspoken. 2 weeks later, during a thunderstorm that knocked out power across Brookline, Emma found Alexander building a fort of blankets and pillows in the living room. "Backup generator only powers essentials," he explained. "I thought we could camp out here tonight." They sat inside the fort, illuminated by battery-powered lanterns, talking for hours. Alexander shared stories of his childhood, the alcoholic father, the mother who worked 3 jobs, his determination to never be helpless again. "That's why your sister's situation hit you so hard," Emma realized. "You couldn't protect her." Alexander's eyes glistened in the low light. "But I can protect you. Both of you." The confession hung between them. Emma reached for his hand. "Alexander, I need to know. Is this still just an arrangement to you?" Before he could answer, a sharp pain seized Emma's abdomen. Her water broke, soaking through the blankets. "The baby's coming," she gasped. A month early, Alexander's training took over. He carried her to the car, driving through the storm to the hospital, one hand firmly gripping hers. "Everything will be all right," he promised. "I'm right here with you." Emma believed him, not because of his money or power, but because of the man she'd come to know, the man she'd fallen in love with, despite all her careful intentions. For 18 hours, Alexander never left Emma's side. He fed her ice chips, massaged her back through contractions, and whispered encouragement when she thought she couldn't continue. "You're the strongest person I've ever known," he told her, his voice fervent. "You can do this, Emma." When the doctor announced complications, the baby's heart rate dropping, the need for an emergency C-section fear gripped Emma. "Don't leave me," she begged Alexander as they wheeled her toward surgery. He squeezed her hand. "Never." In the operating room, Alexander sat by Emma's head, his eyes focused entirely on her while doctors worked behind the surgical drape. When the sharp cry of their daughter filled the room, tears streaked down his face. "She's perfect," he whispered as nurses cleaned and wrapped the 6-pound baby girl. "Absolutely perfect." The nurse placed the newborn on Emma's chest for a moment before taking her for necessary tests. Alexander leaned down, his forehead touching Emma's. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "For our daughter." "For everything." Later, in the private hospital suite Alexander had arranged, Emma watched him holding their daughter with reverent care. His finger traced the tiny features of her face, wonder evident in every line of his body. "What should we name her?" Emma asked. Alexander looked up, his expression suddenly vulnerable. "I was thinking ... Lily, after my sister." Emma's heart filled. "It's beautiful." "Lily Reed." Alexander took a deep breath, sitting carefully on the edge of her bed. "Emma, there's something I need to say. Something I should have said months ago." She braced herself, wondering if now that the baby was here, He'd revert to their original arrangement, separate lives, connected only by legal documents. When I proposed our marriage, I told you it was a business arrangement, he began. But something happened that I didn't anticipate. He gently placed Lily in her bassinet, then took both of Emma's hands in his. I fell in love with you, he confessed. Your strength, your kindness, your spirit. I wake each morning grateful that you're in my home, in my life. I go to sleep each night wishing you were in my arms. Emma's breath caught. Alexander, let me finish, he said gently. I know this isn't what you agreed to. If you still want the original arrangement, I'll honor that. But I needed you to know that for me, this stopped being business a long time ago. Tears filled Emma's eyes. When did you know? The night you had those false contractions, he admitted. When I thought something might happen to you or the baby, I realized you'd become everything to me. Emma reached up to touch his face. I've been falling in love with you too. I was afraid to say it, afraid you'd think I was trying to change our agreement. Alexander leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. New agreement then. No expiration date. No separate living arrangements. Just us, building a life together, raising our daughter. I like those terms. Emma whispered out their kiss sealed more than a contract. It sealed a journey that had begun with two strangers, one desperate, one guarded, and transformed them into a family bound by something neither had been looking for, but both had found. Love, the most valuable asset even a billionaire couldn't buy, got as Lily slept peacefully beside them. Alexander and Emma held each other, no longer alone, no longer afraid, their future stretching before them like a promise finally fulfilled.